The story begins with an adventurer and his son reading a book. The father shared how he became an adventurer under the protection of the World Tree. The son asked his father where the World Tree was. The father paused for a moment, then said that deep in the forest there was a small village where people from different races lived together. One day a spider dropped an apple from the tree to a boy with green skin. The boy smiled, picked up the apple, and thanked the spider. He also gave thanks to the World Tree before running back to the village. Each day the villagers greeted the World Tree with bright smiles. This is a story of a man who reincarnated as the World Tree. Before all this happened, the main character's name was Kotoba Sekai. He was a true hikikomori, a shut-in who stayed in his room all the time. He didn't go to school, didn't work, and didn't talk to anyone. In fact, he barely even counted as part of society. He almost never left the house. However, he somehow went outside for some reason. When he finally stepped out and went to a store near his home, something terrible happened. A man with a knife was inside and tried to rob the store. He shouted at the woman behind the counter, demanding money. Sakai's first reaction wasn't fear, it was worry. The life of the store clerk was in danger, and he saw it happen right in front of him. Then he realized something. The girl looked familiar. Wasn't she Kasumi Kaide? They used to go to the same university? Kotoba had liked her back then, but she had never really noticed him. He hadn't expected to see her here of all places. He doubted that she would even recognize him. He wondered why she was working in a small store like this, but he didn't have time to think about it. If no one did anything, she would die. Sakai acted without thinking. He ran at the robber and shouted. He shielded Katie from the robber. The man turned surprised and stabbed Sakai in the chest. As Sakai fell bleeding, he managed to tell Katie to run. His vision blurred, but he saw her escape the store. As everything faded, one final thought passed through his mind. Everything was okay. She was safe, and for some reason, that made him feel at peace. When Sakai woke up, he saw a woman standing in front of him. She was a goddess. She told him she was sorry that his life had ended the way it did. Sakai had tried to protect a girl from a robber, but he died in the process. The goddess explained that even if he hadn't helped, the result would have been the same. Sakai began to think that he had died for nothing, but the goddess said that wasn't true. She said she admired his choice. He had lived alone and still chose to save someone else. That, to her, was meaningful. Even if his life had felt empty, she believed it had value. Still, Sakai thought about her words. Deep down, he knew his life had gone nowhere. Nothing had changed until the very end. It felt like he had never really existed at all. The goddess apologized for bringing up his painful past. She offered him a chance to be reborn in another world, but she needed his permission. She asked if he was willing to accept this second chance. Sakai thought about the offer. Reincarnation reminded him of those stories he had seen in anime. The idea of starting over felt like hope. He accepted the offer without hesitation. Before sending him to the new world, the goddess said he could make one request. Sakai thought hard. He remembered the knife that killed him and asked for a power that would stop something like that from ever killing him again. He wanted to be strong. Strong enough to protect others for real this time. He wanted to become someone like that. The goddess smiled. A soft glow appeared and strange circles formed around the protagonist's feet. She said it was a wonderful wish. He would now live in another world. It felt warm like a mother's hug, so warm that it made him want to sleep. At that moment, he died and was reborn. He felt like he was rising to a new level, leaving his old self behind. When he opened his eyes, he discovered that he had become a plant. He had wished for a body that could never die, but he didn't expect this. He had no idea what kind of life was waiting for him now. Suddenly, someone's boot stepped on him. Sakai felt pain. A large boy walked past and said that Aruto was getting on his nerves. He said someone like Aruto should stay low and crawl at their feet. Aruto was small, thin, and looked scared. The big boy said farmers' children would always stay farmers until they died. He told Aruto to follow him because he was the village chief's son. Then he and his friends laughed and walked away. Sakai called the big boy rude. He was still hurting from being stepped on and was trying to stand back up. He noticed the small boy hadn't left yet. Sakai thought the boy would step on him too, but Aruto looked at the small sprout and asked if it was okay. He wondered if it hurt when the big boy stepped on it. He felt sorry for the sprout and called it a poor thing. Aruto placed some sticks around it so others could see it and avoid stepping on it. Then he said goodbye and left. Sakai thought Aruto was a kind boy and felt thankful. He knew he would never forget what the boy had done. He wished for Aruto to always be happy. A strange magical energy came out of Sakai and flew toward Aruto, who slowly disappeared into the distance. Time passed. The sun burned hot in the sky. Sakai was very thirsty. There was no rain and the heat only got worse. If this kept going, Sakai felt like he would dry up completely. He hoped the boy would come and water him. Then, a small slime appeared nearby. It saw the tiny sprout and watered it with a simple wave. Sakai thought the slime was very kind, but he started to worry. Was everything really okay? After giving water, the slime looked even smaller than before. It made a few sounds and Sakai felt thankful. Because of the slime, he would be able to live longer. Sakai quietly wished for the slime to live a good life. What Sakai didn't know was that a bit of his magic had reached the slime. After that, the slime began to visit every few days to water the sprout. It seemed to gather water from somewhere else because each time it came back it looked a little bigger. More time went by. One day, while trying to gather even more water, the slime suddenly changed. It evolved and grew larger. Even with this change, it still only thought about the little sprout, so it went back again. At the same time, in a small village near the sapling, a group of children stood inside a chapel. They were gathered in front of the village priest. The priest explained that today was the coming-of-age ceremony in the village of Pokot. He said that when children turned 14, they took part in the ceremony to receive a skill, a special gift from the gods. The priest added that some skills were powerful enough to let people become adventurers. Aruto, one of the boys, wondered what kind of skill he might get. The priest said he hoped each child would receive the skill that suited them best. One by one, the children stepped forward to take their turn. When it was almost Aruto's turn, a large boy pushed him aside and told him not to expect much. The boy said Aruto would probably get the most useless skill, while he believed he would receive a powerful one, like the Holy Sword. Aruto quietly nodded and waited for his turn. The priest called his name and Aruto walked up the stairs and approached the magic board. The priest asked him to open his status window and take a look. Aruto held out his hand. Suddenly, the board lit up brightly. The light filled the chapel and made everyone cover their eyes. When the light faded, Aruto's status window appeared. It showed his name and his skill, Blessing of the World Tree. It was marked as an ultra-rare skill. This skill gave him a 200% growth rate in all of his stats. The priest was shocked. He said he had never seen or heard of such a skill before. He told Aruto how amazing it was and congratulated him. The people inside the chapel cheered. Someone said it was incredible. Aruto's parents said they were proud of him. Aruto smiled, happy with the skill he had received. The large boy stood off to the side, waiting for his turn. He told Aruto to watch carefully as he would now show everyone his powerful skill. The priest called him forward. The boy touched the magic board and opened his status window. But instead of a rare or powerful skill, his window showed a normal skill called Cursed. The boy was devastated. His face fell in disbelief. The crowd went silent at first, then people began whispering. Even though his father was the village chief, many in the crowd called his skill useless. The boy kneeled there, humiliated. After the ceremony, everyone went home. A girl with a bow on her head ran up to Aruto. Her name was Beatrice. She asked him about leaving the village and becoming an adventurer. Aruto greeted her and said how he couldn't believe he could really become one. Beatrice reminded him that he had a UR skill, so he was likely to succeed. Aruto replied that if that was true, then he would give it a try. He raised his hand and said his skill was called the Blessing of the World Tree. He recalled how in the forest there was a small sprout growing. Maybe that was the World Tree. Aruto, who had received a rare and powerful skill, soon became a renowned adventurer. 20 years passed since then. Aruto, now older and retired, came back to his home village, Pokot. He held a small boy in his arms and thought about the Blessing of the World Tree skill. The boy asked about the World Tree. Aruto answered that it must be the protection given to him by the World Tree and it was surely granted to him. He also reminded him that it was important to always respect and take care of the World Tree. The boy, Jiru, agreed. Beatrice, who became Aruto's wife, just smiled at her husband's and son's exchange. Aruto then recalled that the fence around the tree he built back then must have probably fallen apart and needed to be replaced. He told his son to go ahead and that he would catch up soon. Jiru excitedly ran into the forest. The sprout from 20 years ago had grown. Now, Sakai stood about 2 meters tall. He wouldn't die even if someone stepped on it, but his trunk was still quite thin. Lately, he didn't seem to grow much, and he doesn't know why. Jiru stood in front of the tree and wondered if it was really the World Tree. Sakai replied that he wasn't. He was our protagonist, Sakai, and this year he had turned 20 years old. The fence around the tree had almost completely fallen apart. Jiru decided to remove the broken fence and clean up the area. Sakai angrily asked why he was getting rid of something so important. The boy didn't answer but kept cleaning and fixing the place. Sakai asked the boy what he was doing. That small fence and some slime were all he had for 20 years. So why was the boy clearing it away? Suddenly, Jiru stood in front of the tree and stayed quiet for a while clasping his hands together. He thanked the World Tree for its blessing and for giving his father the UR skill. Sakai was confused and asked what a UR skill was. Now that he can see it, Sakai thought Jiru looked a lot like the little kid who had built the fence before. Could this really be his son? Suddenly, a voice called out to Jiru. A fat boy with a sword on his shoulder walked over. It the child of Aruto's fat bully in the past. He asked Jiru what he was doing there and why he needed the tree. He said he was going to use it to practice with his sword because it was the best one around. He told Jiru to move out of the way. Sakai felt scared. Jiro stood his ground and said he wouldn't let the fat boy harm the tree. He told him that this tree was special. In 100 years, it would become the Great World Tree. The fat boy laughed and asked if such scrawny-looking tree was a world tree. Then he grabbed Jiru's shirt and angrily warned Jiro that if he didn't move, he would cut him down first. The fat boy swung his sword, but Jiro jumped out of the way. Jiro grabbed a stick from the ground and asked the fat boy to stop. He didn't want to fight, but the fat boy swung again. This time, Jiro blocked the attack with his stick. The sword flew out of the fat boy's hands and landed in the ground. The fat boy, now angry, started fighting with his fists. He threw a punch at Gil and told him not to act tough. Jiro held the stick to protect himself. Then a voice said, "Enough!" It was Aruto. The fat boy quickly greeted him. Aruto told the fat boy to leave the tree alone and to be more respectful toward nature, otherwise he would provoke the wrath of nature. The fat boy apologized and said he was going home. Aruto looked at Jiro with a serious face, then smiled and patted his head. He told Jiro to keep using the sword techniques he had taught him. He praised Jiro instead of getting mad. Afterwards, Sakai watched them leave and felt happy. The two actually had made him a new fence. Sakai wished Jiro he would also find happiness too. Still, he confused with something else. Weren't they calling him the World Tree? After Jiro left, Sakai's life went back to normal. He would probably grow again soon, but his growth had slowed down. Would he still become a big tree, or would he stay small and plain? Just then, a huge slime came out from behind the bushes. Sakai was surprised by its sudden appearance. The slime stretched its arms toward the tree and started pouring water on it from both sides. Sakai wondered if this was the same slime from before. The slime kept watering the tree. Sakai noticed how much bigger it had become. Sakai thanked the slime and then saw several small slime blobs nearby. He wondered if they were the huge slime's kids. Each of them aimed water at the tree from different directions. Sakai realized that while he had already been watered, the little ones kept taking turns watering him more. Now the tree had enough water to last a long time. Sakai felt grateful and sent good energy to the slime family. As time passed, Sakai grew taller. He reached about 3 meters in height, but after a while, the growth stopped again. Sakai started to worry. Maybe he needed more nutrients. Just then, a black wolf stepped out of the forest. It looked cheerful for some reason and walked up to the tree. Sakai wondered what it needed from him. The wolf looked around, turned around, and started forcing something out of it under the tree. Sakai knew what this pose meant. He wanted to tell the wolf to stop, but he was too late. The wolf let out a satisfying bark with a relieved expression on its face. The wolf buried its waist in the soil. Just then, Sakai noticed something changing in his wooden body. Sakai realized he had started growing again because of the nutrients in the wolf's waist. It was expected since it also contained magical power. Realizing he received nourishment, Sakai decided to be grateful to the wolf too. He also wished it a good fortune. Time went on and day turned to night. One day the same wolf returned, but this time it had a different appearance and could talk. There were also other wolves accompanying it. The wolf came to the tree and gave its apologies for doing something rude. Sakai was surprised to see it evolve and gain common sense. Sakai couldn't really hate the wolf since it was thanks to it that he was able to grow a bit. The wolf knew an apology wouldn't be enough, so it gave Sakai a gift, monster carcasses. The wolf explained that they would make better nutrients than an excrement. The wolf pack offered the gift as a way to make up for the leader's actions before. Sakai accepted and thanked them. The dead monsters were full of nutrients and magical power. Sakai believed he would grow even taller now. From then on, the wolves came often, leaving dead monsters behind. Thanks to them, Sakai kept growing stronger. After some time, a spider built its web in the tree. Sakai had grown tall, reaching a height of 7 meters. One day, 2 woodcutters came near the tree, led by an old man. The old man said the tree had grown tall enough. Feeling proud, Sakai agreed, realizing he had become big. He could hardly believe he was once a small sapling. He looked at the people closely and noticed by their clothes that they were from the same village as the boy he remembered. He didn't understand what they wanted or if he could help them somehow. Then the old man gave a command, "Cut the tree down." Sakai was confused and could only scream inside. A spider came down from a tree using its web. Nearby, an old man stood and laughed. Sakai, the tree, didn't understand why he was being cut down or what he had done wrong. When one of the woodcutters swung his axe, a group of wolves suddenly jumped out of the forest. They stood in front of Sakai, blocking the woodcutters. The wolves growled and showed their teeth, ready to fight. The woodcutters stepped back, keeping a safe distance. Sakai felt happy that the wolves had come to protect him. The old man yelled, confused by what was happening. Then he said they wouldn't touch this tree and asked for forgiveness. Sakai felt relieved. He was safe, for now. But he knew it had been a close call. He wished the wolves could hear him so he could thank them. Even though they couldn't, Sakai sent them a wave of positive energy to show his gratitude. As the woodcutters walked through the forest, the old man muttered about how it was a shame. He said that Sakai was a strong, perfect tree and that it would have been great to cut down. but he didn't understand why the wolves acted that way. One of the woodcutters pointed to another tree and asked about it. The old man said it wasn't as good, but they could try it. Just then, a small demon flew out of the forest. It gave the woodcutters a wicked smile. Time passed. Sekai kept growing and finally reached 10 meters tall. Red fruits appeared on his branches. He didn't know what kind of fruit they were and couldn't eat them himself. One day, the large slime returned with its children. It came to water Sekai. He was thankful and wanted to share the fruit with it. He hoped it would enjoy the gift. The slime ate the fruit. A strange light appeared around it, and from the look on its face, Sekai could tell it was pleased. Then the slime began to shine even brighter. A burst of magical energy exploded from it. A queen's crown appeared on its head and a royal cape wrapped around its body. Sekai realized the slime had evolved again. With a female voice, the slime began to talk. She thanked the world tree for its evolution fruit. Sekai is very glad that she liked it. Sekai realized that his fruit helps to evolve. When the wolves brought nutrients to the tree gave them fruits in return. The wolves happily ate the fruits. Right after, a burst of magical energy covered them. Their bodies changed. They stood up on 2 legs like humans, and their bodies became well-defined. The wolves were shocked by the sudden change. The wolf girl said the transformation happened because of the fruit. Another wolf agreed, saying it must be a gift from the world tree. The pack leader said that if they stayed in this place, they would be protected by the world tree. One of the wolves suggested that they should settle there. The leader agreed and said it was a good idea. The wolf girl asked if just the 4 of them were enough to protect the tree. The leader replied that they should return to their den and bring the rest of the pack. They would all live together near the world tree. Before they left, the wolves thanked the tree and promised to repay its kindness. As the wolves walked away, Sekai was surprised that they could now walk upright and even talk. He also noticed that more beings were calling him the world tree. He realized he had grown quite large, maybe even one of the biggest trees in the forest, but he still thought calling himself the world tree was too much. Later, a group of people came to rest under the tree after a long journey. Some of them asked an old and weak priest to hold on. From their clothes, it seemed they were members of a church, and their priest was very sick. Sekai dropped a single fruit to the ground. One of the ministers picked it up, cut it into small pieces, and gave some to the priest. The priest slowly ate one piece. Suddenly, magical energy filled him. He stood up full of strength. The ministers were shocked and asked what had happened. The priest said he wasn't sure, but he believed the fruit saved him. He was certain that this tree was the same divine tree mentioned in the writings of his eldritch faith. The ministers began to worship the tree. They praised its miracle fruit and wished for the divine tree to live a long life. Sekai thought they were a bit too dramatic, but he was glad he could help someone. He wondered what kind of religion they followed and didn't really understand what this eldritch thing was about. A few days later, a new creature showed up under Sekai. It ate one of the magic fruits. Sekai realized he tended to attract various things. A magic light appeared again, and the hungry lizard changed into a lizard man. He thanked the tree for helping him. Sekai on how the lizard man's evolution was way too much. The lizard man then said he wanted to give something in return. He spat out something and placed a strange-shaped stone on the ground. He explained that it was a special gem called the Dragonite gemstone. It formed inside a lizard man's body over many years and held magical power. After saying thank you again, the lizard man left and promised to return someday. Sekai thought the gift was nice, even though he didn't know what to do with the stone. Still, he accepted it because it was given with kindness. Sekai just realized that even those who had never met Sekai before kept calling him the world tree. He wondered if it was written somewhere that he really was the world tree. For now, he decided to take the feeling for now. A few days later, another stranger arrived. This time it was a man. He knelt in front of the tree and asked if he could take the gem lying there. He said he was a merchant named Mokor Bolt. His group had betrayed him and left him alone in the forest. Sekai allowed him to take the gem and even gave him a magic fruit. The man asked if the tree had blessed him. He thanked the tree for everything and went on his way. Later, Mokor went to a shop and showed the appraiser the gemstone. The appraiser said it was the legendary Dragonite. He asked the man where he found such a stone. Mokor had read about magic fruits in a book and remembered eating one. He went to a chapel and asked the priest to check his status window. Before, there was no UR skill, but now there was. The priest said it was thanks to the blessing of the world tree, which had increased Mokor's luck 3 times. Mokor believed it must have been the world tree's doing. That tree he talked to was indeed the world tree. The next day, he returned to the tree. This time he came with guards, goods, and better clothes. He told the tree that he was the same merchant who had been blessed before. He said he had bought the land and would protect the tree as a way to say thank you. Sekai felt happy that the land had been bought just to repay the favor. Mokor's hired guards also put up a sign saying the tree should not be cut down. This way, no one would try to harm the tree. Mokor said he would be glad if the world tree would watch over him in the future. From that day on, the merchant's private army guarded the area. Just as Mokor had promised, they took care of the tree. But the peace didn't last long. One day, a group came and started digging around the tree. The priest with them said the tree was sacred and needed to grow somewhere else. Sekai begged them to stop. The priest said they would take the tree and care for it themselves. Sekai realized they were the eldritch from the other day. One of the guards shouted that the land belonged to Mokor Merchant Company. The intruders got scared and ran away. Mokor was shocked by what they had tried to do. He checked if the tree was all right. Sekai thanked those who helped save him. For a while, Mokor continued to protect the tree and life was peaceful again. Winter came and after some time the tree grew to 10 meters tall. However, there were still many problems. It was very cold and it snowed every day. Sekai couldn't protect himself from the freezing temperature. He often felt cold even on normal rainy days, not just in winter. Many different insects started living in his tree. It would have been okay if they were harmless, but most of them caused him pain. Sekai understood that the insects were only trying to survive. He wouldn't have minded if they were cute, but most of them were pretty gross. He understood that insects also needed a place to live in, but he hoped it was not on his body. He felt disgusted by the creepy feeling when the insects crawl all over his body. Luckily, one creature helped him solve this problem, a cave spider. Sekai learned its name from some people who visited and talked about the spider living in his branches. Cave spiders usually lived in dark places like caves, so it was strange this one chose to stay on him. Sekai felt thankful for the spider. It ate all the insects that were harming him. He realized that spiders could be very helpful. He wasn't sure if giving his fruit as a gift was enough to show thanks. But after the spider ate it, something amazing happened. It evolved into a forest spider. After that, the spider spread its web along the tree's trunk as thanks, and this helped keep Sekai warm. Life became much easier for him. They lived together, helping each other, in a true symbiotic relationship. One day, a heavy snowfall covered the land. From deep within the forest, a group of creatures came looking for shelter. They were goblins. One of them suggested they hide from the snow beneath a large tree. Sekai noticed something unusual. One of the goblins looked more advanced than the others. He was the only one who could speak. He said he felt a strange power coming from the tree. The goblins then decided to build a new village there. Sekai, the tree, was surprised. They were planning to build a village right under his branches. The goblins shouted for others to bring more wood. The goblin children ran quickly carrying logs. It seemed the tree would stand at the center of their village. The goblins didn't touch the tree itself. They didn't try to cut it down or use its wood. Maybe they were afraid of hurting it. Sekai thought that giving them a few branches wouldn't cause harm, so he dropped some to help them. The talking goblin was shocked at first, but then realized the tree was helping. He said the wood was perfect. The goblins thanked the great tree and continued building. Everyone worked together. When the village was finished, the main goblin said it would now be their home. Sekai noticed that his branches were stronger than the others, and the goblins seemed to know it too. They used his wood to build the elder's house. The goblins cheered with joy. From above, Sekai watched and felt warm inside. Later, the goblins made a fire. Some sang songs, some played music, and others just sat around the flames to stay warm. They wanted to thank the tree for helping them. The leader brought out a special goblin drink and poured it onto the tree's roots as thanks. Sekai tasted the drink and found it delicious. Can a tree even get drunk? The goblin village was growing well at first, but recently they started having trouble with food. To help them, the protagonist dropped some fruits. The goblins ate the fruits. And after that, something amazing happened. They began to evolve. Some goblins who couldn't talk before started speaking. They began to look more like humans. Before, all goblins were short, but now they grew much taller, with better physique. Even the female goblins were all cute and have good figures. They were almost distinguishable from humans. Among the male goblins, some became much stronger, with bodies that looked like gorillas. They started to look more like orcs than goblins. At night, they sometimes had parties and danced. Sekai enjoyed watching them have fun. The spider that lived on Sekai also became friendly with the goblins. He was happy about this. Both sides got along well and didn't fight. The spider even ate fruit from the tree just like the goblins. Sometime later, something changed, surprised the goblins. One of the forest spiders became an arachne. She learned how to speak and could talk normally with the goblins. This made their friendship stronger. Arachne went to chat with the goblins and Sekai noticed her talking to the goblin leader. It seemed like they made a deal that helped both sides. He found that interesting to watch. Arachne and her spiders lived above in the tree while the goblins lived below. Their homes didn't get in each other's way, so there was no reason to fight. The goblins gave the arachne alcohol and the arachne made clothes from her webs in return. The goblins probably suggested this trade. The spiders also made bedding for the goblins, and in exchange, the goblins built small tree houses for them. It was a perfect relationship where both sides helped each other. The goblin and spider villages grew together in peace, and the community continued developing. At some point, Sakai started to feel bored, so he decided to give names to the goblins. He named their leader Rinda. He called the hardest worker Gonzalez. The cutest girl was named Henri. She liked sewing and became close to Arachne. The girl with the biggest chest and the most fashionable look was named Kurin. The shortest old goblin was called Gobchin. Every day the protagonist watched them. Before he knew it, the village around him had become full of life. Recently, the goblins had trouble finding food again. Gonzalez said the monsters nearby were too strong, so hunting would be dangerous. Kurin added that there were only a few animals that could be eaten. She asked the leader what they should do. Sakai had expected this. For the past few years, he had given too many fruits to different monsters. Those monsters had changed and turned into human-like creatures. Because of that, the ecosystem was ruined. Sakai wondered how he could help the goblins. He couldn't move from his spot, but then he realized he could move his roots. When he tried, it worked. Some roots came out of the ground, but they weren't something anyone could eat. He wished they would become something like vegetables. Then one of the roots turned into a daikon. Sakai was shocked. He pulled out another root and tried growing strawberries. To his surprise, they grew. He thought it was amazing, so he used more roots and started growing different vegetables. After a few days, many vegetables were growing from the ground. The goblins who came to visit were surprised and didn't know what was going on. They guessed it was a gift from the world tree. Unsure if the vegetables were safe to eat, they took a bite and found them delicious. They called the others and shared the news. The goblins began cooking the vegetables. After tasting their dishes, they were very happy with the results. Even Gonzalez agreed the vegetables tasted and smelled great. Rinda said they were perfect with meat. Sakai realized that his roots could turn into any kind of vegetable. Just like that, the goblins' food problem was solved. Some goblins were chosen to take care of farming, and their village continued to grow. Later, the goblins brought a bowl of stew to the world tree. Rinda said the vegetables were very tasty. They thanked the world tree and hoped he enjoyed the food they made. Just then, someone called out and reported that one of their companions hadn't returned. Gonzalez shouted that goblins from a nearby settlement had taken her. Rinda was shocked by what he said. Gonzalez declared he would never forgive them. Rinda asked him to wait, saying they didn't know the other goblins' true intentions. She wanted to solve the problem peacefully, but Gonzalez insisted he wouldn't let them go unpunished and said he would crush them. The elder told him no. Sakai thought Henri looked cute and understood why the other goblins would get attracted to her. Just then, Arachne came down from a tree. Rinda was surprised to see her and asked if she would join them. Arachne said she would. Rinda thanked her and called the others together. He said he would try to talk to the other goblins first, but if things went badly, he would need Arachne's help. Sakai silently hoped everything would be okay. The next day, everyone came back with Henri. Gonzalez laughed, calling the other goblins pathetic. The others asked if she was safe, and Henri confirmed that she was. Suddenly, the goblins from the other settlement tied up in Arachne's web explained that monsters had recently grown stronger, making it hard for them to hunt. They just wanted food. Gonzalez was still angry that they had kidnapped someone. Rinda admitted that the monsters had become much stronger and hunting was nearly impossible. Henri defended the prisoners. She explained that their situation was bad and asked Rinda if there was a way to help them. Rinda was surprised but said that as long as it didn't happen again, maybe something could be arranged. They did need more help after all. The prisoners thanked him. That day, the goblins celebrated Henri's safe return. For them, every small reason was enough for a celebration. Sakai quietly watched. He guessed Henri had been scared and hoped she would feel better soon. The day after the festival, Gonzalez and Henri met alone near the world tree. Sakai, watching from afar, understood what was happening by how nervous Gonzalez looked. Sakai started to feel jealous when he saw Gonzalez gently hug Henri. But as a tree, Sakai couldn't go anywhere. All he could do was silently watch the goblins fall in love. After some time, the Slime Queen finally arrived with her children. The protagonist felt happy. He didn't expect them to return to water him again. The goblins realized that the slime had done everything for the tree's sake. They always welcomed the slime and supported its efforts. They thanked the slime for working hard for the world tree. Sakai understood that things were going well. He didn't want any trouble between the slime and the goblins, and so far they were getting along just fine. Time passed. One day, Sakai noticed a girl sitting nearby on a rock. He didn't know when the child had arrived, but he remembered naming her Miyako. He tried asking if she needed anything, even though he knew no one could hear him. He was a tree after all. But to his surprise, Miyako replied that she didn't need anything. Sakai was shocked. Had she really answered him? No one should have been able to hear his voice. He asked again if she could really hear him. Miyako responded once more, saying she could hear him clearly. Then she said something even more surprising. She could see his true form. Sakai was stunned. He had always thought of himself as just a tree, but it turned out he also had a spiritual body, not just the wooden one. Sakai was shocked that Miyako could actually hear him. No one else seemed to hear his voice, so he didn't understand why she could. Miyako said she wasn't sure, but but guessed that their magic power was on the same wavelength. Sakai wasn't even sure if magic had wavelengths at all. When the goblins gathered near him, Sakai started growing faster. Without noticing it at first, he was taking in their magic power like breathing air. He realized he was absorbing it just by being close. He guessed this was why he now shared the same magical wavelength as the goblins, and why they could finally understand him. Miyako smiled and said that was probably true. Now that he knew people could hear him, Sakai realized he could finally talk to everyone. Miyako asked if he wanted to. He said yes, he had always been alone, just quietly watching over them. Miyako offered to be his interpreter and Sakai thanked her. That's how Miyako became known as the Shrine Maiden of the World Tree. Later, Miyako told Rinda about it. Rinda was shocked and asked if she was serious about hearing the voice of the World Tree. Miyako insisted she was telling the truth, but Rinda still wasn't sure. He asked the World Tree to drop a fruit if it understood him. Right away, a fruit fell and hit him on the head. He picked it up, wide-eyed. He was amazed that they could really talk to the World Tree. Realizing how important this was, Rinda said he needed to tell the others. He asked the World Tree if they could hold a meeting with it. Miyako replied that the tree didn't mind. Rinda was happy. He gathered everyone to share some news. He suggested they try talking to the World Tree. Then he turned to the tree and asked if it wanted to say something to them. Miyako passed the message to the tree. After that, she asked the leader how Gonzalez and Henri were doing. Rinda was confused and asked who those names belonged to. Sakai realized that those were the names he had made up himself. Miyako explained that the World Tree had given names to everyone. Rinda was surprised and asked if it was true. She also wanted to know all of their names. So Miyako called out each goblin and told them their names. Since the goblins were curious, they agreed to be named. The leader was surprised that his name was Rinda, but he thought it sounded great. The rest of the goblins were happy to receive names from the World Tree. They realized it had been hard not having names before. Sakai felt a bit shy when they praised the names he had chosen. Then Miyako looked at Gonzalez and Henri again and asked how they were. The two of them became nervous. Miyako said the World Tree felt relieved and hoped they would live happily. Sakai was glad the goblins had another peaceful day. Some time passed. One day Benjamin came back from hunting, but he wasn't alone. Rinda welcomed him and noticed something was wrong with his arm. Benjamin explained that the animal he hunted fought back and scratched him. Then he said he had brought an orc with him. Rinda was surprised by how big the orc was. Benjamin confirmed it and said the orc had gotten lost. The orc agreed and said Benjamin had helped him. Now he wanted to stay and work with them. Rinda said it was nice to meet him because orcs were rare these days. He added that this moment would be part of their village's history and offered to introduce the orc to the World Tree. They walked to the tree and the other goblins met the orc. Miyako told Sakai that orcs were rare, not as common as goblins. But orcs weren't very smart, which made life hard for them. Their numbers were getting smaller every year. Even so, orcs were strong fighters. They were usually the ones who led in battle. Goblins, on the other hand, were better at thinking. Even with that, goblins couldn't beat humans or dragons. But if goblins worked together with orcs, they could survive better. That is the reason that they coexist. Sakai thanked her for the explanation. Rinda then introduced the orc to the World Tree as their new teammate and part of the village's defense. He said he wanted to name him Orugu and asked the World Tree what it thought. Miyako said the name was fine and Rinda was happy. Orugu said he was glad to meet everyone. Miyako gave him a fruit and said it was a welcome gift. Orugu knelt, took the fruit and ate it. As he chewed, a glow surrounded him. He evolved into a stronger form of his kind. He looked at the World Tree and Miyako. His speech became clearer, and he thanked them for the fruit, saying it was delicious. Then he turned to Rinda and Benjamin and said he looked forward to working with them. Rinda felt happy. As time passed, the village continued to grow. One day, Sakai saw werewolves in the distance. He thought they were the same ones who used to bring him the bodies of monsters as food. He hadn't seen them in a long time, so it felt good to see them again. But the werewolves were confused when they saw a goblin village under the World Tree. Their leader felt angry and let out a loud roar. A female werewolf asked what was happening and wanted to know who the goblins were. She was shocked that anyone would dare build a village around the World Tree. To them, the goblins had no right to be there. Sakai knew the werewolves were quick to fight and it made him scared. Rinda stepped forward and asked what they planned to do. Then Gonzalez and Orugu showed up with weapons. Gonzalez demanded to know who the werewolves were and warned them that this was their home now. He told them to leave right away. Sakai didn't know how, but he had to stop the fight. He shook his branches hard, trying to send a message. Gonzalez pointed to the shaking and said the World Tree was angry. But Sakai could tell they still weren't understanding him. Things were getting out of control. Just then, Miyako arrived in time. She spoke quickly and ran to Rinda. She told him something, and Rinda asked if it was true. He turned to Gonzalez and told him to stop. He explained that the World Tree didn't want them to fight the werewolves. The goblins started to calm down. However, the werewolves didn't feel the same way. Their leader asked what was happening. He didn't believe what the goblins said about the world tree. He thought they were only saying that because they were scared. To him, the goblins were nothing more than parasites living off the world tree. Just then, a werewolf child turned to him and said that everything the goblin girl told them was true. The world tree didn't want them to fight. She also confirmed that the goblin girl could really hear the voice of the world tree and was its shrine maiden. The pack leader was surprised. He asked the werewolf girl if she could also hear the voice of the tree. She said yes. He asked again to make sure, and she confirmed it once more. Sakai realized that someone from the werewolf side could also hear the world tree's voice. Sakai felt glad that another child from the werewolves could hear him. He started to wonder if even more children could hear him too. He told them that fighting was wrong, and the girls understood his message. They asked if he had anything else to say. Sakai decided to keep speaking with the two of them. The girls held hands and shared his message with their leaders. He told them that the world tree didn't belong to anyone. Without choosing a side, he asked them to stop fighting and live together in peace. The werewolf leader was surprised that the two girls were saying the same thing at the same time. He realized they were really hearing the voice of the world tree. He turned to Rinda and said sorry for the misunderstanding. He had thought the goblins were using some kind of trick. Rinda also said sorry for being unfriendly. The werewolf leader then suggested they stop talking outside and go to the village. The werewolves agreed. Sakai felt happy. The werewolves and goblins had found common ground. They all decided to meet in Rinda's house to talk more about what to do next. Afterward, the werewolf leader said that their werewolf tribe would live in the village and work together with the goblins. They agreed to protect the world tree as one group. Everyone cheered, and the village quickly held a welcome party for the werewolves. Sakai watched all of this. At first, the werewolves had been unfriendly, but now they had become allies. As a result, the village grew even more. Along with the goblins, Arachne and her spiders, and one orc, the werewolves also became part of the village. Sakai gave the werewolf leader the name Wolfram. He also gave a name to the girl who could hear his voice. He called her Mimiko. The goblins and werewolves got along well. However, the werewolves only ate meat, so they didn't eat Sakai's vegetables. Even so, the werewolves were strong fighters. They could hunt easily in the forest. Because of this, the goblins were able to eat meat more often, which made them happy. The werewolves shared their hunting skills while the goblins used their brains and building skills. Both sides helped each other. Arachne and her spiders made clothes and bedding for everyone. Life became more comfortable. Even though the werewolves had fur, winters were still cold. The clothes made it easier for them to stay warm and move around, and so the village continued to grow and improve. It became a place where many different kinds of races lived and worked together. Ever since the werewolves arrived, something unusual happened. For the first time, the usual slime didn't come. Instead, a slime queen showed up. The villagers were shocked to see her. She said it had been a long time since she last visited and noticed how much the village had changed. The villagers were surprised and asked what brought her there. She explained that she was the slime who used to water the world tree and she was just checking in. She also asked who the new faces in the village were. Rinda was surprised and asked if she was the slime who wore a crown. She said yes and explained that it was usually her children who came in her place. Rinda was glad to see her again and told everyone that the slime queen was a guest and should be treated with respect. The others welcomed her warmly and apologized for not knowing she was the one helping the world tree. The slime queen told them it was all right. Sakai remembered that she was the same slime who had helped him from the beginning. He told Miyako about it and shared that he helped her evolve by letting her eat his fruit. Because of that, she changed into a form that looked more human. Her body was still pale blue, like a slime. He used to call her Catherine. Later at Rinda's house, he asked why the slime queen had come. She asked if she could live in the village. Rind was surprised but said it was okay. She said the village looked fun and thought the slimes could live there too. They could help out by cleaning waste and removing toxins. That's how Catherine and the other slimes ended up staying in the village. Sakai didn't mind, he actually felt thankful to them. Rin showed Catherine the house they had built for the slime residents. Catherine was happy. The other villagers quickly became friends with her. They even invited her to go fishing in the river. Sakai saw how well Catherine and the slimes got along with everyone. The number of special residents living under the world tree had grown once again. Not long after, someone was secretly watching Miyako and Rinda meet. These watchers were guards hired by Mokor. Since the day seemed calm, they decided to return and report back to him. But before they could leave, a group of robed men attacked them from behind. The older guard quickly protected his partner. The attackers asked who they were and assumed they were trying to steal the world tree. Without waiting for answers, they drew their swords and attacked. The older guard fought back, holding his ground. The younger female guard used magic to distract the enemies and told her partner they should run. She then cast a smoke spell and escaped with him. The attackers lost track of them in the smoke. The female guard worried about the older guard's injury, but he said it was more important to report everything to Mokor. At that moment, someone approached and asked what had happened. It was the bald high priest from before. He asked about the noise and confusion. The squad leader explained that things were getting worse and that other groups had also made their move. It was clear they were all after the sacred tree. The squad leader said they would handle the attackers. So far, no one had sent backup, but they were almost ready for a fight. The high priest couldn't believe a merchant was one step ahead of him. Still, he saw this as a chance to show the true power of the Eldritch Church. He swore that no one else would claim the sacred tree. He ordered everyone to move quickly and take it back. The group accepted his command with full energy. When they reached the village where the sacred tree grew, they were surprised. A village had been built near the tree, and a group of people from different races stood waiting for them. The leader of that group stepped forward and asked what was going on. Rinda and his allies glared at them. He stepped forward and warned the visitors not to come any closer. The high priest walked ahead and introduced them as members of the Eldritch Church. He was shocked that monsters had built a village near the sacred tree and had the nerve to stand against him. He told them to give the tree back right away. His group raised their weapons and moved forward, ready to fight. Gonzalez said their words were selfish, since the sacred tree didn't belong to anyone. Rinda agreed. He pointed out that the enemy had brought many fighters just to take the tree for themselves. When the attackers charged, Rinda quickly ordered his group to stop them. Urugu stood behind him and let out a loud roar. The church members were shocked to see a high orc standing with goblins. The werewolves shouted that there were even more monsters and rushed into battle. The Arachne joined the fight too. Urugu kept roaring as he threw powerful punches. The high priest, confused and angry, shouted that it was not normal for monsters to fight together. Then he ordered his group to retreat. The villagers celebrated because everything turned out well. They had won. At that moment, Miyako appeared. She said they did a good job and mentioned that the World Tree wanted to speak with them. When the leaders of the different races approached the tree, Sakai thanked them for protecting him from the strange attackers. Rinda disagreed. He said the tree had it backward. They were the ones being protected by the tree, so of course they would protect it in return. He explained that it was thanks to the tree warning Miyako about the enemy's arrival that they were ready to fight. Without that warning, they would have been in serious danger. Actually, Sakai had heard the sounds of Mokor's guards fighting members of the church. That helped him realize something was wrong in the forest. It was a good thing he was able to alert everyone. Still, he found the Eldritch Church stubborn and troublesome. He didn't think they would give up so easily. The morning after the church's attack, Mokor arrived at the village with his men. Sakai told the villagers that even though humans were often seen as enemies, Mokor was different. He asked them not to be afraid. Rinda agreed and said there was no reason to doubt the words of the World Tree. When Mokor arrived near the village, Rinda asked him what the humans wanted from them. Mokor told them to wait, saying he didn't mean any harm. Rinda could feel that he was telling the truth, but still warned the others not to come closer and to speak clearly about their purpose. The merchant agreed to this. He asked Rinda if they were also protecting the World Tree. He explained that he had once been saved by the World Tree, so they were likely on the same side. Rinda believed that Mokor was telling the truth. The merchant went on to say that they had no plans to hurt the World Tree. He only wanted to protect it. He asked if they had seen a signboard near the tree. He said he was the one who placed it there since the land where the tree stood was under his control. He also mentioned that he had placed guards around the area to protect it from dangerous people, like the ones who had shown up the other day. Rinda then guessed that they had been watching the village for some time. Mokor confirmed that they already knew about the village. Since the villagers were not harming the World Tree and were actually protecting it, he chose not to interfere. He also pointed out that he was human, while they were monsters. He believed that if he approached without care, it would only make them nervous. However, one of his lookouts had been attacked by members of the Eldritch Church the day before. These enemies were more determined and dangerous than they first thought. They had already tried to attack and would likely return with more people next time. Because the situation had become serious, the merchant suggested that they join forces. He asked if they were willing to work together to protect the World Tree. Rinda thought for a moment and agreed that Mokor's idea seemed like a good one. They also wanted to protect the World Tree but wondered if there was anything else they could gain from this. Humans had often tricked them before. Mokor then took something out of his bag and handed it to Rinda. He asked Rinda to smell what was inside. Rinda held the bag, sniffed it, and said the smell seemed familiar. When he opened it, he looked at Mokor in surprise and asked if it was pepper. Mokor confirmed it. It was a type of spice, one of the things he sold. He asked them what they thought of it. Spices were in high demand in the human world. But since the villagers were monsters, they couldn't enter cities and they didn't have money. Still, they were smart. They had even built a good village here. The problem was they had no one to trade with. So Mokor offered to trade with them. Rinda was surprised. Mokor explained that as they could see, he was a merchant. If they started a trading relationship, the village could get new items. This could help them grow and improve. Rinda admitted it sounded interesting, but one question bothered him. What would the merchant gain from all this? Could they offer something valuable in return? Mokor said he had werewolves as allies. They were skilled hunters, and hunting could bring in many valuable things like fur and bones that sold well. Rai understood and agreed to do business. He also pointed out that goblins grew vegetables, which were useful too. Slimes, he added, could give the purest water. The merchant explained that clean water like that was rare and expensive in the human world. He asked the villagers if they realized how valuable it was. Water that clean, especially after being purified by slimes, was hard to find. People paid a lot of money for it. Rai was surprised. He added that Arachne and her spiders could make good clothes and fabric. Mokor agreed and said their village had many valuable resources. He hoped they now understood. Rinda replied that Mokor was right. It was hard to say no. He shook Mokor's hand and said they had a deal. They would work together. Then he invited his new partner to continue their talk inside his house. Mokor happily agreed. When they later reached the World Tree, Mokor saw Miyako and greeted her. He asked for her name and Rinda introduced her, explaining that she was the World Tree's Shrine Maiden who could speak directly with it. Miyako said the World Tree wanted to speak with Mokor. He was surprised. She told him that the World Tree was grateful for what he had done in the past. Mokor also gave thanks. He said he was grateful for becoming a successful merchant, and had always wanted to return the favor someday. Sekai replied that he should be the one thanking Mokor. He said Mokor had done more than enough. He had put up a sign and protected him from the dangerous Eldritch Church. Sekai felt sorry for the warrior who tried to protect him but got hurt. Then a fruit dropped. The injured guard took a bite of it and was shocked when all his wounds healed instantly. The guard gave thanks to the World Tree. Sekai turned to Mokor and asked if staying out of the village's problems was part of his plan. The village was a good trading partner and also helped protect the World Tree. He guessed that was why Mokor didn't try to drive the goblins away earlier. But Mokor said he hadn't thought that far. Everything felt too overwhelming at first. That was how Mokor and the villagers came to an agreement. They would protect the World Tree, and in return, they began trading. Mokor left a few of his people behind to act as messengers and guards. They were given homes in the village. Even some humans started living there as representatives of their race. After the deal with Mokor, life in the village improved. Spices and seasonings became available, and the villagers started cooking new dishes. Their food used to be plain, but now it looked and tasted much better. Crafts also began to grow. When the first tools and equipment arrived, the villagers were amazed. Weapons, axes, and shovels appeared. They had only used simple tools before, made from forest materials the goblins could find. The new goods were of high quality, and the goblins especially enjoyed the human alcohol. When Rinda first tried the drink, he said it tasted very good. The merchant smiled and promised to bring more next time. Rinda was happy and thanked him. Later, Mokor brought even more kinds of drinks, and the goblins spent almost the whole day enjoying them. Everyone in the village liked their new way of life. Several years passed, and Sakai had grown into a very large tree. He used to feel big before, but now he was truly huge. He had become an amazing sight. Sakai even started to believe he might be something special, maybe even a divine being. Nothing in the forest was bigger than him. He thought he was the largest thing in the world. The village nearby had also changed a lot. It had grown enough to be called a small town. It now had shops, market stalls, and places where people gathered for culture and events. As the town got bigger, the forest around it grew too. Sakai started to worry that the town's growth might hurt the forest. He wondered if it was because of the energy the town gave off. But soon he realized there was nothing to fear. From his great height, he could see just how massive the forest had become. People started calling it the Great Forest of Lelgiano. No one was sure why it was named that. Some said it was named after a legendary dragon, but no one knew the full story. The village also changed in more personal ways as the lives of its people continued to grow and shift. Rinda and Miyako got married and had a child named York. Even though there was a big age gap between them, they still chose to be together because their love was mutual. Miyako grew up to be a kind and friendly girl who always stayed polite. Their wedding was a large event. On that day, Benjamin drank too much and ended up dancing without clothes. Most of the villagers felt jealous of Rinda since he married someone much younger. Still, they respected him as a strong and dependable leader. Gonzalez and Henri also got married and had twins, a boy and a girl named Riku and Sora. Both children showed skill in physical activities just like their father. Gonzalez cheered loudly when he watched them train, proud to see his traits in them. Sora lifted a club and told her father she would crush a boar's head with it. The twins were good-looking and became popular among the villagers. The most surprising partner was Benjamin's. He married Mimiko, the shrine maiden from the werewolf tribe. Mimiko grew up to be strict and fair. She walked up to her husband and called out to him with a sharp voice. Benjamin flinched and asked what was wrong. She became angry that he even had to ask. He had promised to take care of Emerald. Mimiko charged at him with a stick in hand. He tried to defend himself and said he had just forgotten. Their child, born from a goblin and a werewolf, was the first of his kind. They named him Emerald, after the precious stone. He became the first known wolf goblin in the village. Meanwhile, the leader of the werewolves, Wolfram, married a werewolf named Hannah, the most beautiful among the female werewolves. They had a child and named him Jonas. They were training Jonas at an early age since he would have to become the next leader of the werewolf tribe. Changes also happened in the spider pack led by Arachne. A new kind of spider appeared called jungle tarantulas. They had small bodies and moved quickly. Their job was to scout the forest with the best mobility. At the same time, more orcs came to live in the village. Luckily, some of them were females, so they were able to start families and have children. Now there were 15 orcs living in the village. Orugu and his wife, along with their child, were in charge of keeping the village safe. These brave defenders were ready to fight back against any threat, but the changes didn't stop there. One day, Sakai felt a small tremor. The shaking grew stronger, and the villagers noticed a shift in magical energy. Suddenly, a bright light glowed around the world tree. Not far from the village, a group of elves stood on a hill. When they saw the light, they knew right away. This was the rebirth of the world tree. The elven squad raised their hands and glowing magic circles appeared above them. All the elves seemed to fall into a trance as they kept reaching toward the sky, chanting something like a spell. The villagers were confused and didn't understand what was happening. Rinda said he had no idea either. The elves had just arrived, and suddenly magic had filled the air. Miyako stepped forward and demanded they stop. One of the elves called them shameless and ugly monsters and swore to drive them away. A powerful magical vortex then appeared and formed a huge fireball. She called the villagers under the world tree as parasites and told them to perish. Just then, Sakai called out to the elves to stop. The leader of the group, Era, was shocked. Even the others paused. This caused the huge fireball to disappear. Era asked with wonder if that voice belonged to the world tree. Sakai was surprised too. Could she really hear his voice? All the elves began to cry from the overwhelming feeling. They said they could hear everything. As elves, they were chosen people by the world tree. They could hear the world tree's words anywhere in the world. Sakai realized that all of them could hear his voice. That would make the conversation easier. He told them that fighting was not allowed. The elves listened carefully. Era pointed at the villagers and called them beasts and monsters, but her words were cut off when her mouth was suddenly covered by a silk web from Arachne. Sakai told everyone to stay calm, reminding them that everyone here lived in peace. He said that if the elves were on the side of the world tree, then they should try to get along with everyone. Era no longer resisted. If the world tree had spoken, she had no right to argue. She turned to the goblins and apologized for calling them ugly and shameless monsters earlier. She also said sorry for the trouble they had caused. Miyako then asked why they were here and if they had a connection to the world tree. She explained that the tree itself wanted to know. Era, surprised, asked if Miyako could understand the world tree. The goblin girl calmly said yes. Era then shared something important. The previous world tree was already dead. Sakai was surprised by what she said, but everything soon made sense. He found out that he was the next world tree. There had been one before him, but it had already died. Era explained that the previous tree had passed away recently, so they began looking for a new one. They had traveled a long distance before arriving here and were shocked to see a town built around the world tree already. Sakai quietly noted that the tree was already dead. He asked Era what a world tree was in the first place and how many existed in the world. Era told him that there could only be one. The largest tree in the world becomes the world tree. When a new one takes its place, the old one dies right away. Since Sakai grew to become the largest tree in the world, the previous one withered away. Sakai realized that the previous world tree had died because of him and felt guilty about it. However, he remembered that the goblins had called him the world tree before. Era explained that the goblins probably sensed that he was meant to become the new world tree, like a foresight. Sakai was surprised. Even if it was true, he still felt guilty that the old tree had died. Era gently said it wasn't his fault. It was the natural principle of the world. When a new world tree was born, the previous would simply wither away. Sakai accepted that. Era added that the elves would no longer harm the city. In fact, they were happy to meet everyone. Sakai said he was fine with them staying but wondered what the goblins thought. Miyako replied that the goblins didn't mind. The elves were the followers of the world tree, so they couldn't just drive them away. Sakai understood. He hoped everyone would get along. The elves then officially became part of the town. Everything was settled quickly. It turned out they knew a lot about the world tree, and Sakai hoped to learn more from them. Era then introduced him to the other elves. Their names were El, Elin, and Eleanor. Sakai thought they all had similar names, which made them hard to remember. Their faces also looked alike, and he had trouble telling them apart. Still, they were very smart and knew magic. Sakai worried if they could get along with the werewolves and goblins. But it turned out he had nothing to worry about. The elves quickly found work in the city and earned their place. They could start a fire with just magic, surprising the townspeople. The wolves were especially happy when the elves made an ice box to keep meat fresh. They also helped dry laundry in no time. However, with the arrival of the elves, a new problem came up. There was no place for them to stay. Miyako apologized and told them they would have to stay in the gathering hall for now because there were no empty houses. Era asked why they couldn't just build one. Rinda replied that while goblins were good builders, they didn't use magic and couldn't build a house overnight. They first needed to gather materials, which would take several days, but Era said she never meant for the goblins to build it. Rinda was confused and asked what she meant. Era explained that the world tree could help. With its power, building houses was easy. She asked the tree if it could help. Sakai didn't refuse, but he didn't know what he could actually do. All he thought he could manage was to drop a few branches. Era looked puzzled and asked if he still didn't know his own powers. She said the previous world tree had built many things, not just houses, using its power. Sakai was surprised. He didn't know the tree could do that and asked how. Era explained that the old tree had shaped its roots to build. That was all it needed. Roots alone could become a house. Sakai finally understood. He had never thought of using his roots that way. He had only used them to grow vegetables before. Now he wondered, could he really turn them into something else? Sakai asked everyone to wait because he wanted to try something. He gave himself a task, to grow his roots to the surface. When he did, a solid house suddenly appeared in front of the surprised villagers. Rinda couldn't believe his eyes. Benjamin was amazed too. It looked like something magical, an entire house made in seconds. But then, something went wrong. The house quickly fell apart. The villagers were confused. How could something made by the world tree collapse? Era said it seemed like Sakai hadn't reached his full strength yet. Even though he looked big, he was still growing. She added that the last world tree also failed the first time. Sakai realized that meant he still had a lot of room to improve. Maybe he needed to use his imagination more. He believed he could do much more, but still felt a bit upset. He had thought he had built a strong house, but it broke apart too fast. He had wanted to be helpful. Out loud, he apologized to the villagers for being so weak. Rinda disagreed. He told the world tree not to think of itself that way. Besides, it wasn't a waste. Even though the house fell, they now had building materials. They could just rebuild it, and it would take less time than starting from nothing. Sakai sighed and said he understood. He would try again. He pushed out more roots. Ryan said it might fall again, but that wasn't a big problem. They just needed to make the structure stronger. Then they could build a simple house quickly. Era agreed and thanked the city leader. Sakai made the foundation using his roots, and the goblins strengthened them and started building again. After a few hours, the goblins finished some houses good enough for sleeping in. At the same time, Sakai slowly began to understand how his power worked. He didn't need the help of the goblins anymore. Sakai was able to create a strong, beautiful house almost by himself. Rinda was amazed. It would have taken them a long time to build something so big and solid, but Sakai did it in no time. Benjamin pointed out that it was also their first time working together with the World Tree. Era thanked everyone who helped. Now that the houses were done, she said she wanted to take a bath. She asked Rindo where the bathroom was. Confused, Rindo asked what bath she was talking about. Era was shocked when she realized that the town didn't have a bathhouse. Benjamin, confused by her reaction, told her there was a river nearby and that it should be enough. But Era strongly disagreed. Thinking about it made her feel like everyone in town was a little dirty. Miyako looked at herself and began to shake. Frustrated, Era asked Sakai to build a bathhouse immediately. Sakai agreed to try. At the elves' request, construction began. Like before, Sakai used his magic to create the materials and foundation, while the goblins did the building. This time, the elves helped more closely. They used their magic to lift heavy things and work together with the goblins. The elves also used their magic to heat the water. After a few hours, the public bathhouse was finished. It looked so nice that everyone who saw it was impressed. When Rinda and Wolfram stepped inside, Ryan admired how having a building with hot water felt like a luxury. Wolfram sighed at how warm it was. Ellis suggested they try soaking in the water to feel the difference compared to the river. The others agreed. When a large wooden tub was filled with hot water and scented oils, Rinda and Wolfram got in. The warm bath felt amazing, and they couldn't hide how much they enjoyed it. With the elves' arrival, new traditions began. Men and women bathed separately. A mixed bath area was also added for elders and families. The townspeople loved the new idea. Sakai let out a deep sigh. He was tired and thought it would be nice to soak in the hot spring, or at least wash off in cool water. It was late in the evening and the town was quiet. Sakai heard footsteps and saw Era arriving with her group. They were carrying buckets of water. They felt thankful to the World Tree, whom had clearly worked hard to help them. They didn't know how to properly thank him. Era said he must be tired and should get some good rest. The elves poured water over his roots. Sakai enjoyed the feeling. It felt refreshing. He felt alive again. The next morning, Sakai still felt tired. He wondered if it was because he had used too much power the day before. It seemed like using such a strong ability came with a cost. He realized he had to use his imagination and think carefully when using it. If he had a brain, it would probably feel tired too. When he created vegetables before, he didn't feel this drained, but the house he made yesterday was much bigger, and he used more energy than usual. He also noticed he had become a little shorter because he used some of his roots. He knew he needed more practice to use his power properly. There was also something new that came with the elves, their special alcohol. Wolfram really liked it because of its sweet taste. It made his whole body feel warm. Rinda was curious about how it was made. Sakai had heard a strange rumor that it required elven saliva. But since elves were beautiful, nobody seemed to mind. This drink was also said to be healthy, and could even help you live longer. Sakai watched everyone enjoying the drink. It seemed like alcohol was a big deal here, and people were happy with it. The number of people living in the city had grown a lot. Each group had their own area. There was one world tree, 150 goblins, 90 werewolves, 30 elves, 25 humans, 5 arachnes with extra spider-like monsters, 15 orcs, 1 slime girl with many normal slime, and 5 wolf-goblin hybrids. The arachnids lived high in the world tree, while the others stayed near the base. At first, the merchants from Mokor came just to observe. They didn't understand how people could live with monsters, but over time, they became friends with everyone. If someone asked why Sakai didn't talk much about the arachne, the answer was simple. They lived at the top of the tree and rarely spoke with those below. They loved sewing clothes, which helped them get along with others. Their way of life was different, and they only came down a few times a year, usually during festivals. Speaking of festivals, one very evening, the elves gathered around the world tree and prayed. It seemed to be part of their daily tradition. Curious, Sakai decided to ask why they did it. Era explained that faith was important for the world tree to grow. The more people who believed in it, the stronger it became. Era added that their prayers helped the tree gain power. Sakai thought about it. It was true. He always grew stronger whenever people or creatures gave thanks to him. He realized that it was because of their faith. The elves had always been thankful to the world tree, and their prayers had made a difference. Era said the protagonist should have gathered enough faith and power by now. She asked him to show them his true form. Sakai was confused since he was standing right there. But Era explained that with enough faith he could create a humanoid clone, a form that would let him move and act more freely. Sakai was amazed. If what she said was true, it meant he could do something incredible. Era then raised her arms and called on the world tree to reveal its true form. The elf folded her hands as if in prayer and explained that faith was the main source of the world tree's power. The more people and creatures believed in it, the stronger it became. With enough faith, the tree could even create real miracles. She said they had been praying to him for several days, so he must have gathered plenty of power by now. With the accumulated faith, he could create a human-like body and use it as a clone. If he did this, he would finally be able to move around freely. The elf told him it was a simple process, much like when he created a house. First, he needed to prepare a body. To do that, he had to form a person out of his roots, and he could even try it right away. Sakai, however, felt unsure. He wondered if making a human body was even allowed, or if it broke some law of nature. But Era reassured him that there were no taboos for the world tree. In fact, the world tree before him had already done the same thing. Even though he was still nervous, Sakai decided to gather his courage. He spread his roots outward, and they became wrapped in a glowing haze of magic. The elves around him gasped in awe when they saw a human body slowly forming on the ground. Sakai could hardly believe it himself. He had truly managed to shape a human form. His roots were so flexible that he could not only build houses and grow food, but also form a body with small details. Soon the head and arms started to form an outline. Sakai realized that if he could imagine anything, he could create things both wonderful and terrible. For now, he needed to picture a human form. He disliked the appearance he had in his past life, calling it a weak and pitiful body. He did not want to return to that scrawny appearance. Also, none of the people in this world looked Japanese anyway, and he was the only one from his homeland. This time, he wanted to look stronger and more fitting for the world he lived in. He remembered the fantasy games he used to play and thought about the heroes he admired. He decided to mix some of his old features with the elegance of the elves. Slowly, his new body took the form of something between a Japanese man and an elf. When he finally looked at what he had created, he felt amazed but also uneasy. The body looked lifeless, almost like a corpse, but the elves around him seemed pleased. Their admiring eyes told him everything was fine. Sakai asked what was next. Era explained that the next step was for him to take control of this vessel. He needed to focus his magic and faith powers into it. Following her words, Sakai gathered energy, released one of his roots, touched the new body, and pushed his energy inside. A faint line of light appeared on the chest of the body. Then the body's eyes slowly opened and it rose. The elves were struck with shock. They could hardly believe what they were seeing. Sakai lifted his new hands and felt them move as they should. A surge of emotions rushed through him. He stood up and cried out in joy. The elves praised him for doing it and looking so cool. Rinda and the others came over to check what was happening. Since the day he had been reborn as a tree, he had not been able to take a single step. But now at last a new chapter of his life had begun. He could walk again on his own. Sakai decided to check if his body was working properly. He moved each limb one by one and tested his senses step by step. Everything worked as it should, and he felt amazed to find himself truly human. The only difference was his height, which was now shorter than in his past life. He stood at the size of a high school student. He asked the elves for a mirror, and Era quickly brought one to him. When Sakai looked at his reflection, he thought he looked handsome. Now that he could move freely, he planned what he wanted to do. First, he wanted to taste the local food. Then he wished to travel across the land, read the books of this world, and most of all, visit the bathhouse. Since the day it was built, he had envied the townsfolk who enjoyed it every day. The thought alone made him laugh in satisfaction. At that moment, Rinda could hardly believe what he was seeing. Before him stood the human form of the world tree. Sakai thought it was proper to greet them in this new form. He raised his hand and offered himself to their care. Still caught in wonder, Rinda grabbed Sakai by the arm and leg, lifted him high, and shouted with joy that this was a wonderful day. He declared that they would celebrate with a feast for the world tree. The elves blushed when the fig leaf covering Sakai's Sakai slipped away. He quickly covered himself with his hand while thinking it was not necessary to hold a party. Still, he noticed how much everyone loved to celebrate. Era objected to his thought, saying this was a true reason to rejoice. As the leader of the city, he had finally revealed his form to them. Everyone wanted to meet and talk to the world tree now that they had graced them with his presence in human form. That evening, the residents prepared a lively celebration that lasted long into the night. They drank wine, laughed together, and shared food, each of them filled with joy that the world tree had given them such a miracle. Era poured wine for Sakai and asked if he enjoyed it. He admitted that he did, but what he liked more was drinking together with them. When he had been a tree, even the taste of alcohol had been pleasant, but now in his human form it felt even better. Era replied with happiness that they had waited a long time for this moment and could finally drink alongside their master. Sakai told her he understood. She then asked for his name, which surprised him. She explained that they could not always call him Master or World Tree. He thought carefully. In his past life, his name had been Kotoba Sakai. This was a new world, yet he felt that names here could still sound like his own. Deciding it was fitting, he chose to keep that name. With a smile, he told the elves he would be called Kotonoha Sakai. The elves were surprised at the sound of the name, but they accepted it. Era called him Master Sakai and promised to never forget it. Sakai felt at peace with his choice, for it marked a new beginning in this strange and wonderful world. After that, he spoke about many things with Rinda, Miyako, and the others. It was the first time he had seen this city and its people through the eyes of a human. He felt as if it could be his hometown. He also believed there was a place for him in this city, since he had been welcomed so warmly. When the welcoming party ended, he recalled there was a place he ever wanted to go. Sakai went to the bathhouse and sank into the water with relief. It had been many years since Sakai last took a proper bath, and the warmth felt almost unreal. The chance to relax without a single thought filled him with comfort. At times like this, he felt as if his soul was slowly being washed clean. Just then, the door creaked open. To his surprise, a group of elves entered, wearing only towels. He felt shocked and annoyed, wondering why they had come to the men's side of the bath. Without hesitation, they began stepping into the water with him. One elf spoke with calmness, saying that everything was fine and that today the bath was only for him. She even remarked that he looked like a child. More elves joined, and they told him to let them wash his back. Sakai felt confused, asking himself why this strange situation was happening. He grew uneasy, for he did not even know where he should look, nor how to react. The elves surrounded him and started moving him from side to side as they spoke and made requests. Sakai tried to resist and push them away, but his efforts changed nothing. Era scrubbed his back and asked if he enjoyed it, then placed her hands on his shoulders as if to give a massage. She wondered why his body felt so tense and guessed it might be because he had only begun moving. Another elf, whose face Sakai could not distinguish from the others, promised to help him relax with a foot massage. She took hold of his legs and pressed her fingers against his feet, noticing the stiffness there as well. Sakai struggled harder, begging them to stop, but they refused to let go. Their hands continued moving over him despite his protests. Suddenly, from outside the bathhouse, a loud shout burst through the air. When his bath was finally over, Sakai admitted that even though it felt uncomfortable for him, the elves were very skilled at giving massages. He felt his mind and body cleansed. Era later asked if they could do it again sometime. Sakai then asked her where he would sleep that night. She laughed and reminded him that, as always, he could create a new home for himself. The elves were approaching him again. They explained that they remembered he had no place to sleep. If he did not mind, he could stay in their home. Sakai firmly refused, and added that, as Era had said earlier, he would try to create a home of his own. Era pointed out that with Sakai's current abilities, he might even be able to build a great mansion for himself. Sakai thought about it and said that anything was possible. After all, he had already managed to create a human body. He felt that his power to create was growing stronger, but to use it fully, he would have to return to the form of a tree again. That would be troublesome, and he wondered if he should really use his roots in such a way. Now that Sakai thought of it, he had been transforming his roots into various things like food and houses. He thought his main body, the world tree, would get smaller the more he used his ability. In fact, it even grew larger. This showed that the cost of his power of creation was not his roots, but the power of faith in him. Sakai looked at his hands and questioned whether he could truly use these powers in the shape of a human. In addition to the elves, Rinda and Miyako also appeared. Sakai chose a spot for construction and decided to try it there. He stretched out his hands and focused all his strength on his imagination. Roots began to grow from his hands, and he felt them pushing outward. He had to extend the roots further and shape them carefully. He stayed deeply focused. Since everything was working so far, he wondered how much farther he could go. This time he felt determined to build a house for himself, one that would at least stay standing. The elves held their breath as they watched his work with amazement. At the same time, he noticed that his body did not shrink as he had feared. Suddenly, a real house began to rise from the roots spreading out of his hands. After a while, the work was complete. In front of him and the others stood a massive mansion. Era looked at it with great wonder and said it was amazing. At that moment, Sakai's strength seemed to leave him, and he sat down on the ground feeling very tired. Era sat beside him and said he had done well. Rinda told him to leave the inspection of the house to him. Sakai felt grateful for their concern since he was too tired to continue. It seemed he had used too much faith, but he believed that after resting he would recover. However, since he took in a human form, he felt like everyone's faith toward him had grown even stronger. Era asked with worry how he felt. Unlike before, he could only talk to the others through an interpreter. Sakai stood up, shook himself off, and assured Era that he was fine. He thought that since people can meet him in person, he also felt that his power was growing stronger. Meanwhile, Rinda carefully studied the house and noted that all its parts looked stable. When leaving the house, he told Sakai that it was safe to enter. Sakai was glad to hear that and cheerfully stepped inside his own home with a sense of awe. He dreamed of finally being able to rest well, but then he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw the elves were still followed him. He looked at them in surprise, wondering why they had entered after him. Era explained that it was only natural. Since they were the people of the world tree, they would take care of him and live together with him in the same house. Sakai was surprised because it did not sound like a request at all. She told him that they had once lived together with the previous world tree as well. She also pointed out that the mansion was so large that there would surely be enough space for everyone. It was also impossible for one person to handle such a huge place alone, so they would take care of everything, beginning with the cleaning. Sakai still tried to resist, thinking that they already had their own homes. Era calmly answered that it was fine since there were many of them, and if some moved in with him, then the others would have more space left behind. When she noticed his confused face, she asked with sadness if he was trying to forbid them. Sakai looked at her and felt unable to refuse when she appeared so upset. In the end, he agreed and said they could each choose their own rooms. The elves became cheerful and thanked him for his kindness. He then announced that he was going to bed. After opening the door to his room and stepping inside, he still could not enjoy the quiet, because the elves followed him inside again. He wondered why they were still trailing after him, and Era explained that he might feel lonely sleeping on his own. Sakai reacted with disbelief, but the others stood close together and admitted that they felt lonely without him. They pleaded with him, saying they could not sleep unless they stayed nearby. Sakai at first refused and told them to go to their rooms, but their pleading faces made him reluctantly give in. Era noticed that he was finally beginning to understand them. She showed her gratitude and reached for his hand. He pulled away and told her to stay where she was. Sleeping in the same bed was still impossible for him. Seeing her worried look, he softened his tone and added that they needed to take it slowly. She smiled, saying she understood, and suggested that they should begin with simple closeness. She hugged him tightly, and though he tried to pull away, she kissed him lightly on the cheek and wished him a good night. Sakai lay there, startled by the gentle embrace. For him, it was a new and unfamiliar feeling, something he had never experienced even in his past life. Lately, more elves had come and they began to take up a large part of the city. It soon became clear that elves did not eat meat at all, and the vegetable supplies were slowly running out. Then Era made a proposal. She suggested that they should build large-scale farms. Sakai thought about it and realized her idea made sense. Until then, there had only been small vegetable gardens, and those could not really be called proper farms. At that time, he still did not fully understand how his ability worked, but now that he had mastered it better, he could easily create larger farms. He could also improve the variety of vegetables. Before, he only grew the vegetables he remembered from the past world, but after trading with Malkor, he gained seeds of plants that grew only in this land. Each time he tried something new and it succeeded, his confidence grew. He decided to place the large farms on the edge of the city and fill each farm with different crops. Rinda welcomed this idea with joy and believed that it meant they would never run out of vegetables again. Moreover, Sakai decided to build greenhouses, and each vegetable needed different amounts of water. Luckily, the elves had already taught him everything he needed to know. One day, he wrote his plans in a notebook and thought about speeding up the growth of the crops. Era explained that this could be done, which surprised Sakai. She gave him a large vessel filled with roots and told him it was a legendary growth stimulator that her family had kept safe for generations. At first, Sakai had doubts, but she reassured him that everything would be fine and that it would not change the taste of the food. She admitted it was valuable but also said there was no need to worry, since there was a way to produce more of them. Sakai then understood. With his ability, he could create growth stimulants without any real problems. He decided to try. He stretched out his hands toward the vessel and focused. Within seconds, another vessel appeared beside the first, identical and filled with the same substance. Sakai was amazed. He had succeeded. He carried the vessel into one of the greenhouses and spread the stimulant over the soil beds. Seeing the results, he felt pleased. With farms of this size, they would never run short of vegetables again. Era mentioned that they could also sell the extra crops to the Malkor merchant. Sakai looked at the vessel and realized how powerful this growth stimulant truly was. Era agreed, saying it was a gift of the World Tree. Sakai thought about it and became curious. In this world, the World Tree seemed like an all-powerful being, and its strength was something very interesting. He felt eager to try even more. Soon after, Sakai realized that it had been a long time since he had last seen the merchant. Malkor came over, and when he saw Sakai, he was struck with surprise. He had finally seen Sakai's true form and felt as if he was standing before a god. The joy of their meeting was shared between them. Sakai welcomed the merchant warmly, showing him their farms and offering him fresh vegetables. Malkor noted that the vegetables, along with wine from the elves and goblins, had become very popular among the people. Everyone in town felt glad that they could now buy such rare goods. Sakai then explained that he had even made wine from the World Tree. The merchant was astonished by this. Sakai described how resin from the World Tree was used and how its leaves were also added to the drink. The locals had given this special alcohol the name World Tree wine. It was known to taste wonderful and to ease tiredness, so it quickly became a favorite in the town. The merchant tried the drink himself and admitted that it was truly delicious and would surely sell well. Sakai smiled at his reaction. When Malkor was ready to leave, Sakai praised his work. The merchant gratefully promised to return and start selling the World Tree wine. He left with his cart, and soon after, the wine was placed for sale in his town for a high price. An employee questioned whether the price was too much for wine. Malkor strongly argued that this drink was unlike ordinary wine since it came from the World Tree itself. Surprisingly, a customer came over and decided to buy a bottle. The girl, Sheena, went home with the wine. She entered the room of her sick father, Edward. She told him she had bought a rare drink called World Tree wine and wanted to share it with him. Edward thanked her and poured the wine into a mug. He looked at the glowing liquid and said that he did not have much time left, but at least he could enjoy this cup. He admired the beautiful color and rich smell of the wine. Sheena reminded him that the doctor had warned against drinking alcohol, but she believed one small cup would not cause harm. Edward gave a faint laugh and agreed. He raised the mug and drank. What happened next was unbelievable. The moment Edward finished the cup, he suddenly felt a surge of energy. He leapt from the bed where he had been lying for so long. His strength and health seemed to rush back into his body. Sheena stared in shock, unable to speak at first. Her father felt stronger with each breath. When the doctor arrived later for his usual examination, he could not believe his eyes. The man who had been so weak was now standing tall and full of life. The doctor checked carefully, then confirmed the illness was gone. Edward himself was overwhelmed, realizing this miracle had come from the World Tree wine. He exclaimed it was all thanks to Sheena buying it. Sheena was happy her father was all fine now. The next day, Edward went to Malkor's store with his daughter. After sharing his story, he thanked the merchant for the valuable product. Malkor could hardly believe what he heard, so he asked again if it was true. Sheena confirmed it and explained that when her father drank the drink, he immediately felt better. Edward spoke with deep feeling and said they were truly grateful to the merchant. When they left, the merchant held the bottle of wine in his hands and realized it was something remarkable. He knew he had to tell Sakai about it right away. He saddled his horse, and before long he reached the city of the World Tree. After telling Sakai everything, Sakai smiled in understanding. The merchant asked what they should do next. Sakai replied that he had no objection and allowed him to heal. When the merchant asked if he should keep selling it, Sakai agreed there was no problem with that. Mokor understood and thanked his ally, deciding then to sell the wine of the World Tree. This drink cured sickness, restored lost strength, and healed wounds. Adventurers began to buy it instead of using other potions. People in the city were freed from their illnesses and cries of joy filled the streets. When taken like ordinary alcohol, it also had an excellent taste. In a short time, the wine of the World Tree became popular everywhere. Later, it was said that this wine became a legendary elixir, but that was another story. At that time, the fame of the drink spread to the dwarves. They tasted it and were pleased, saying it was delicious. One of them remarked that the merchant must have brought it from the forest. Another dwarf smiled and noted that they too would explore that forest. Soon after, while on his nightly patrol, Rinda yawned and told himself that it was time to finish his rounds and get some rest. As he walked past a wine warehouse, he heard strange noises coming from inside. Curious, he opened the door and found a group of old men drinking wine straight from the barrels. Startled, he shouted at them and demanded to know who they were. The leader of the group wiped his mustache and said the drink was truly a masterpiece. At that moment, Sakai and Mokor's assistant came rushing in after hearing Rinda's cry. The assistant quickly checked the barrels and cried out in despair when he realized that all the expensive wine was gone. The dwarves' leader only smiled and said it was an honor to be praised. Sakai, surprised by the scene, asked who these people were. The old man replied with another question, asking if they were locals or outsiders. Sakai, puzzled, explained that he was the World Tree of the city. The old man laughed, hugged him, and asked for forgiveness, saying they simply could not resist good wine. He explained that dwarves had a sharp nose for such things. Sakai thought aloud, wondering if these short old men were truly dwarves. He had always heard that they loved fine drinks, and now it was proven true. Meanwhile, the merchant's assistant kept lamenting that everything had been drunk. He worried that Mokor would be furious and scold him harshly. Scratching his head, he asked if there was anything the dwarves could do as an apology. The dwarves' leader answered with confidence that they could at least make a few tools. Sakai grew curious at the thought of tools. At once, the leader gave a heroic command to his companions to bring out the field forge. The dwarves shouted in unison, and suddenly the warehouse filled with the sounds of blacksmithing. In an instant, equipment appeared as if from nowhere. Bellows, anvils, a furnace, and hot coals all began to work with incredible speed and power. The sight left everyone stunned, and Sakai could only wonder where they had gotten all of it. After a short while, the dwarves' leader raised a newly forged shovel above his head and declared that it was finished. He proudly asked what the owners thought. Rinda turned the shovel in his hands, examined it carefully, and admitted that it was far better than anything they could normally buy. The quality was several levels higher. He then tried the axe that the dwarves had also made. Turning it this way and that, he realized it was lighter and much easier to handle. Sakai, amazed, thought that these old men could truly make work easier. The dwarves' leader laughed with joy at the praise and offered to make even more. Swords, staves, bows, or spears, whatever was needed, his team could craft. Finally, he turned to the merchant's assistant and asked if this would serve as a proper apology. The assistant held the shovel, tested its weight, and admitted that it was remarkable. If it were sold, it could bring in a very fine profit. Rinda turned to the dwarves' leader and said with amazement that they had made real treasures. He asked them to share this knowledge with their people as well. The old man explained that it was not a problem, but their alcohol supply had already run out. Rinda was surprised, wondering if they were not drunk yet. Ridaf, the leader, answered that they were. Sakai then asked if the people of his city would hold a celebration and drink all night. The old man could not believe his ears, since they had already emptied everything. Sakai told him not to worry because now that they were here, they could enjoy every last drop. After a while, the old man thought that this group carried no bad intentions. They had even crafted tools, which meant they brought more gain than loss. Besides, more alcohol could always be made. Soon everyone had been woken up and a great drinking feast began. It became a welcoming party for the dwarves. Their leader, Ridaf, drank more than anyone else and felt very pleased. From time to time, he laughed in a warm way and said how much he liked their town. Wolfram, who had also drunk a good amount, invited the old man to live with them. In shock, Ridaf asked if that was truly allowed, since they needed a large space to stay and had been searching for one. Wolfram said the dwarves' skills were important for improving the town, and he believed Sakai felt the same. Sakai agreed that he would be glad to welcome them if they decided to move in. Ridaf then felt sorry for drinking the precious wine without permission, yet he realized everyone had been far too kind to him. Because of this, he chose to remain in the town and celebrated the decision. Sakai offered him a fruit and explained that it came from the World Tree itself as a welcome gift. With that, 15 dwarves officially joined them. With the arrival of the dwarves' tools, work in the town became much easier. The people felt pleased with their settlement, but soon they realized they needed to increase alcohol production. After some time, Era pointed out that the defense of their city was weak. The main character believed they still had strong warriors. The werewolves and goblins proved themselves in battle, and the orcs added even more strength. Yet Era was not convinced, since dwarves had already managed to sneak in. That fact alone showed the weakness of their defenses. Sekai carried the role of the World Tree in this land, and that made him a certain target. Scoundrels would always try to reach him, just as they had with the previous World Tree. Many would desire to use his power even if it meant putting him in danger. Because of this, they all knew they had to strengthen their defenses. The question was how they could achieve it. Era announced that they would create golems. A golem was a creature of stone, but most of their existence were now left as legends. Only a few still existed in forgotten ruins, and no one in the present world knew the secret of making them. Yet Era explained that the elves had passed down the old traditions, and she had learned the method of creating golems. With her guidance, anyone could shape one. Sekai found joy in the thought and urged that they begin. The making of the golem began quickly. The townsfolk gathered the needed materials while Sekai shaped huge stones that would serve as the base. Goblins and orcs joined in, helping to place the stones together. Once the body took shape, the pieces were bound with clay. The elves carved magic circles into the stone with steady hands. At the last step, Sekai gave part of his own power by placing the fruits of the World Tree inside to serve as the core. When the golem was complete, Era used her gift and called for it to rise. Slowly, the mound of stone began to move. A towering figure stood tall, filling everyone with awe. Sekai thought it was a strong and stirring sight. With golems now on their side, the city became much safer than before. Era felt relief, knowing they could finally rest without constant fear. Even Wolf rejoiced, already dreaming of bringing one along on a hunt. Their strength had grown greater than ever with the golems by their side. By the end, 3 golems had been made that day. They were not living beings, so they never grew tired from the many tasks given to them. They never complained, and could guard the city even through the night. The town now felt safer than it ever had before. Sometime later, Sekai cut a piece of fruit into a bowl and began to eat it with enjoyment. He believed that the fruits from the World Tree caused changes in anyone who ate them. Because of this, the fruit was called the Fruit of Evolution, though it was simpler to call it the World Tree's fruit. Sekai had once shared the fruits with the elves. Their ears grew longer, and they claimed they had become high elves. Their magic power increased as well. When the dwarves ate the fruits, they turned into elder dwarves. Their bodies became taller and they felt great joy. Rudolph was especially pleased, for his form appeared even stronger. The orcs changed into great orcs. They grew much larger and taller, looking almost like solid stone. For lesser creatures such as slimes, more fruits were needed for change. A normal slime would first grow into a big slime, then a slime king, and later a slime girl. After that stage, the fruit shaped their bodies in different ways. For advanced races like elves, however, one fruit was enough to reach their highest form. Goblins had several stages of change, and with enough fruits they could reach greater forms as well. Still, further growth demanded far more fruits than usual. On his way, Sekai met Benjamin and returned his greeting before moving on in thought. Ira watched him with surprise, but he did not notice. A group of children surrounded him, and he gently patted their heads as they followed at his side. He kept walking, lost in his own reflections. It seemed reckless to allow fast changes in so many species. The more they evolved, the greater the effect on the land itself. Some monsters would not become friendly, and the memory of the eldritch cultists remained as a warning. Because of this, Sekai decided to stop handing out the fruits freely. He ordered the workers to store the gathered fruits safely in the warehouse. They would only be used when truly needed. Soon after, Rudolph went to him and said that they wanted to build their own workshop. Sekai did not object. The dwarf was glad and claimed that they would begin at once. The dwarves chose to set up their workshop inside the town, and Sekai allowed them to do it. They built their creation quickly with their own strength, happily declaring that everything was ready. They also put up their homes with the same effort. The workshop soon turned into a place where weapons could be made, and all their work was done there. Rudolph welcomed Sekai inside and explained that this was where they would craft different tools and weapons. He also shared his hope that Sekai would allow them to make weapons for their warriors. Sekai agreed with the idea. Now that the workshop was done, Rudolph wanted to create weapons right away. His helper shared that they only had wood. The old man stroked his beard and admitted that having only wood was a problem. Sekai was also troubled because real weapons needed tougher material, yet they had none. Then an idea struck him. He took one of his branches and used his magic of creation. The wood changed into solid, fine material. He handed it to the old man and asked if it could be used. Rudolph let out a cry so loud it seemed it could shake the room. He said with awe that this was a legendary material known as Yggdrasil steel. Sekai was stunned. Legendary? It had only been one of his branches. As he grew, his branches became harder, so he believed they might be useful. Rudolph, however, insisted without doubt that this was ill steel, something he had seen long ago. The main character wondered if it was truly that valuable. The old man assured him it was. With it, anything could be made. At once, he ordered his helpers to bring their tools because they had to begin work right away. Rudolph threw the material into the hot coals until it turned red. He then placed it on the anvil and struck it with a steady rhythm. The work grew into shape in his hands until a sword of great beauty appeared before Sakai. The elder dwarf declared that the weapon was ready, and told Sakai to place his magical power into it. Sakai felt shocked, unsure how such a thing was possible. The elder dwarf confirmed it, explaining that the sword had no owner yet. If the protagonist poured his magic into it, the blade would become the one true holy sword in the world. The words slowly sank in, but Sakai did not know how to begin. He lifted the sword, held it close to his face, and closed his eyes. With focused thought, he pushed a piece of himself into the weapon. In that moment, the sword blazed with a brilliant light that dazzled everyone watching. Gasps of wonder filled the air as the weapon started to shift and reshape itself. The elder dwarf pointed out that it was the power of the protagonist that allowed the sword to form its new shape. From any view, it was clear to all that this was no ordinary blade, but a holy sword. Rudolph encouraged Sakai to test it. He swung the weapon and felt as if it were already a part of him. The blade moved with ease, almost as though it knew what he wanted before he acted. Each strike flowed smoothly through the air. Sakai realized that even if the sword came from his own branch of power, it had become one with his body from the start. With excitement, he declared that they should find a way to test its sharpness. At that moment, they heard Benjamin scream that a demon bear was attacking their children. Everyone became alert and prepared. The protagonist felt almost pleased by this, as if the timing could not have been better. He lifted his sword and thought that the demon had arrived at the right time for him. He told his people to step back and let him handle the beast. With determination, he rushed forward, believing this fight would be the perfect chance to test his sword. He attacked the monster without fear. Sakai charged at the enemy and struck with his blade. To everyone's shock, the sword cut through the monster like a beam of light, splitting it clean in half. The force of the strike did not stop there but continued forward, tearing apart the stone walls and even a part of the forest in its path. For a while, the group stood in stunned silence, trying to recover from what they had just seen. At last, the protagonist felt amazed, realizing that this was the true strength of his sword. Rudolph pointed out that it was not only the sword's strength but also the strength of its wielder. He asked what name Sakai would give to such a weapon. Sakai had not thought about giving it a name before, but after a moment of reflection, he chose to call it the Holy Sword Yggdrasil. Rudolph was filled with joy, saying that the name matched the weapon perfectly. From that day, Sakai carried the one and only holy sword. After he saw what his new sword could do, he chose not to mass-produce weapons from ill steel. Instead, they crafted weapons only for their own warriors and refused to sell them to Mokor or release them in large numbers. A rule was set that this steel would only be used for their city. Sending such weapons to the market could bring heavy consequences. To avoid that, they used the steel to make tools instead. From it, they shaped axes and hoes that showed amazing strength. With these tools, daily tasks became far easier, and the people felt the change. Even then, they decided to keep these creations inside their city and not share them outside. Meanwhile, the merchant Mokor sold their wine made from the world tree at a very high price, and this shook the market. The wine began to replace many potions, even though the protagonist only released a small amount of it. Still, that little supply was enough to steal away the doctor's work. The hospital in the city stood empty without patients. Some wards even grew cobwebs, and the doctors waited sadly, wishing for patients that no longer came. Yet nothing worked better for easing pain than this drink. Because of that, the protagonist did not bother much with its distribution. The fruit of evolution, the Yggdrasil steel, and the other rare items from it remained unlike anything else in the world. When Sakai opened the chest of metal, he realized that in the future, they had to be much more careful with what they allowed others to buy. Later, Sakai called for Rudolph. The elder dwarf was shocked when he learned the truth about the steel. Sakai told him to forge 8 more holy swords from it. Rudolph hesitated at the number, but Sakai explained that these swords would be given to the leaders of each race. By doing this, power would be balanced and peace could be built among them. Rudolph thought deeply, then admitted that making 8 holy swords from Yggdrasil steel might be the greatest challenge and honor of his life. He promised to give his full strength to the task. With that, the dwarves began work on the 8 new swords alongside Sakai. When the time came, the first to receive his sword was Rinda, the leader of the goblins. He accepted it with gratitude and asked Sakai if his son York could be the one to give the sword its name. The protagonist agreed without hesitation, seeing no reason to refuse. Rinda then turned to York and told him that he should name the weapon. York was surprised by his father's choice, but Rinda explained that one day York would take his place as the leader of the goblins and the sword would belong to him. York declared that he understood and chose to call the weapon the Holy Sword Goblio. After this, Jonas's son, heir to the werewolf king, poured his own magic power into his sword. He raised it proudly, declaring that he would guide the werewolves as their future leader. He named the weapon Wolfang. The others followed in turn. The holy sword of the Arachne tribe was given the name Arachnecleon. The elves named theirs Elma. The slime people's weapon was called Slimebringer. The dwarves chose the name Dwalbverm. The humans honored theirs with the name Excalibur. At last, the orcs named their sword Ogalper. Sakai believed that with the 9 holy swords, their defense had grown even stronger, and they now stood as a clear symbol of their alliance. Because of this, he chose to call them the 9 founding swords. Later that night, Rudolf and his assistant rested in the bath. Rudolf sat with a bottle of wine, praising the drink made from the world tree. He felt proud that they had crafted 9 holy swords without showing signs of exhaustion, and the taste of the wine seemed perfect. His assistant agreed, adding that even the ache in his lower back had faded away. In his clumsy state, Rudolf let the bottle slip into the water and quickly tried to apologize. He then laughed at himself, realizing he had drunk too much. The bath now carried the wine of the world tree, and he joked in his own mind that no one's back would hurt again after such a soak. As the night went on, the people in the place soon fell into deep sleep, and the bath was left empty. From the ground nearby, a skeleton slowly rose. It staggered toward the bath and dipped its bony toes into the water. The heat stung at first, but soon a wave of comfort followed. Enjoying the feeling, the skeleton lowered its whole body into the bath and relaxed in the warmth. For a moment, it seemed peaceful, but suddenly a burst of magical energy struck the water, sending waves splashing in every direction. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 9. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.